The true crime original, In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. It doesn't matter whether it is via podcasts, streaming platforms, YouTube channels, or TikTok accounts, true crime has taken the world by storm. The novel In Cold Blood by Truman Capote, published in 1965, signaled the start of the true crime genre. Since then, the crime genre has seen explosive growth, with more than 1.6 million print copies, hundreds of true crime documentaries, and more than 200 true crime podcasts to date. In the year 2020, when most of the planet's population was seeking shelter indoors from COVID, they did so by subscribing to various streaming services to preserve their sanity. It is not a coincidence that there has been a spike in interest in the true crime genre, and it's only growing. Welcome to Bad Things. In this video, we look at the groundbreaking In Cold Blood, the crime, the author and his book, and how they spurred our interest in true crime. The crime. Herbert Clutter was a wealthy western Kansas farmer. He was adored and respected by all who knew him, owing to his fair treatment and generous compensation of all those that worked for him. His two adult daughters, Ivana and Beverly, had moved out of their childhood home. Nancy, 16, and Kenyon, 15, were in high school, and Bonnie, Clutter's wife, was said to be incapacitated since the birth of her children because of clinical depression and physical problems. Richard Hickok and Perry Smith, both recently paroled from the Kansas State Penitentiary, robbed and murdered Herb, Bonnie, Nancy, and Kenyon in the early hours of November 15, 1959. Floyd Wells, a former cellmate of Hickok's, had worked for Herb Clutter and informed Hickok that Clutter kept large amounts of cash in a safe. Hickok immediately came up with a plan to steal the safe and begin a new life in Mexico. Hickok described the crime as a piece of cake, the perfect score. Hickok contacted Smith, a former cellmate, about pulling off the robbery with him. In truth, Herb Clutter had no safe and conducted almost all of his financial transactions through checks. On the evening of November 14th, after traveling more than 400 miles across the state of Kansas, Hickok and Smith arrived in Holcomb, located the Clutter residence, and entered as the family slept through an open door. After waking the Clutters and realizing there was no safe, they chained and gagged the family and continued searching for money throughout the home, but discovered nothing of value. Determined to leave no eyewitnesses, the pair argued momentarily before Smith, notoriously volatile and prone to violent outbursts, slit Herb Clutter's throat and shot him in the head. Kenyon, Nancy, and Mrs. Clutter were killed by a single shotgun blow to the head. Hickok and Smith fled the scene of the crime with a small portable radio, a pair of binoculars, and less than $50 in cash. Smith subsequently stated in his formal confession that Hickok was responsible for the murders of the two women. Smith refused to sign his confession when requested to do so. Smith took the blame for all four murders because he felt sad for Dick's mother. Smith added, "She is a genuine sweetheart." After barely 45 minutes of deliberation, the jury found both Hickok and Smith guilty of murder. At the time, their convictions carried the mandatory death penalty. Smith and Hickok challenged their sanity judgments on appeal, claiming that the jury had been swayed by media coverage of the murder and trial, and that they had had insufficient legal representation. 3 times, parts of these appeals were brought to the attention of the United States Supreme Court, but the matter was never looked at. Smith and Hickok were hanged on April 14, 1965, after 5 years on death row at the Kansas State Penitentiary. The author, the book, and its reception. Truman Garcia Capone was an author, screenwriter, dramatist, and actor from the United States. Some of his short stories, novels, and plays, like Breakfast at Tiffany's, 1958, and In Cold Blood, 1966, which he called a nonfiction novel, have been called literary masterpieces. Capote based 2 of his characters on his best friend, Harper Lee. Capote claimed to be a character in Harper Lee's novel To Kill a Mockingbird. Her father was a lawyer, and she and I used to go to court all the time when we were kids. Instead of going to the movies, we went to the trials, Capote said. This may have been a catalyst for Capote's obsession with the murders portrayed in the book. Following Lee's Pulitzer Prize win in 1961 and Capote's publication of In Cold Blood in 1966, the writers became increasingly distant from one another. A 300-word article in the New York Times inspired and fascinated Capote to investigate the murders further. Capote went to Holcomb with Lee and visited the site of the massacre. For 6 years, he came to know everyone involved in the investigation, as well as the majority of the residents of the little town and surrounding region. Capote conducted extensive research for the book, eventually amassing 8,000 pages of notes. Capote conducted personal interviews with Smith and Hickok after they were arrested, prosecuted, and convicted. Capote was particularly taken by Smith, who was portrayed in the novel as the more sensitive of the two killers. The novel was not completed until Smith and Hickok were executed. Capote took notes during interviews, committed discussions to memory, and instantly transcribed the statements when an interview ended. By befriending the spouses of those Capote wished to interview, Lee made inroads into the community. In Cold Blood was released by Random House in 1966 after it had been published as a series in The New Yorker. Capote's nonfiction book, as he called it, brought him literary praise and made him famous worldwide. In Cold Blood is a groundbreaking example of a nonfiction book and a modern true crime narrative. The reality of the crime is methodically and compassionately reproduced, but Capote's primary focus is on the emotional lives of Smith and, to a lesser degree, Hickok, and what may have caused them to commit such horrendous acts. In addition, he utilizes the case's polarities as a launching pad for a larger examination of American ideals in the late 1950s and early 1960s. The response to In Cold Blood. In Cold Blood received widespread praise from the literary world. Critics, however, have questioned its accuracy, claiming that Capote altered facts to fit the narrative, created events that never occurred, and fabricated conversations. Philip K. Tompkins stated, "Capote has, in short, achieved a work of art. He has told an exceedingly well-told tale of high terror in his own way. But, despite the brilliance of his self-publicizing efforts, he has made both a tactical and a moral error that will hurt him in the short run. By insisting that every word of his book is true, he has made himself vulnerable to those readers who are prepared to examine seriously such a sweeping claim." Although criticized by some, In Cold Blood was an immediate hit and is the second best-selling true crime book in history after Helter Skelter, 1974, by Vincent Bugliosi, which details the Charles Manson massacres. When Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s by Tom O'Neill and Dan Piepenburg was released in 2019, Bugliosi's book would also be scrutinized. 20 years of investigation into the Manson murders by Tom O'Neill has refuted virtually all of Bugliosi's theories and evidence. Why are true crime stories so popular? True crime stories are filled with gruesome details and disturbingly fascinating storylines. True crime has, over the years, and with the rise of streaming services and dedicated documentary makers, been solidly entrenched in our culture. True crime stories are recounted in a variety of ways, including fictitious representations of true events, as Capote did. Why is the genre so popular, though? In his book, Why We Love Serial Killers, Scott Bond discusses some of the likely causes of our fascination with serial killers. He theorizes that one reason is that serial murderers like Ted Bundy are well-educated, affluent, and charming, and might easily be your next-door neighbor. This familiarity adds to fear and may make us suspicious of our fellow man. Functioning as a natural safety mechanism, the more information you have about a possible attacker, the more prepared you may be. It is impossible to say exactly when and why people became so interested in true crime. However, we have always been drawn to programs that depict incredibly realistic aspects of society, such as courtrooms or a behind-the-scenes look at the life of a popular celebrity. The People vs. O.J. Simpson is one program that does an excellent job of portraying the O.J. Simpson killings in an extremely realistic and fascinating fashion. This, like other mainstream murder storylines, is heavily influenced by stylized storytelling and that gloomy, gritty style of filmmaking. Add unpleasant protagonists with dubious backgrounds to the mix, and you have a hit show. When we examine the reasons that contribute to true crime's appeal, we see not only the infinite complexities of human nature, but also the more objective truth of people's curiosity about others. Why do you like true crime stories? Is it the problem-solving aspect that makes true crime stories more interesting than others? Do you find it more engaging to consider all the variables and solve the mystery? Leave us some feedback in the comments section on why true crime enthralls you. Capote's In Cold Blood legacy is flourishing. Read it. Thank you for watching Bad Things. Hit the subscribe button, like button, and notification bell, and share our channel for our up-and-coming true crime videos.